New machine, new you. And it's funny, I'm pulling the mic to me. I'm just using the mic on my headphones because I don't have a mic on this machine. Still getting it figured out, folks. Still getting it figured out. Um, I feel like I'm going to be lonely if I don't have this microphone with me, though. It's like what am I supposed to speak into? My ear pods? Oh yeah, that is what I'm speaking into. So weird. Let's check the audio here on the old YouTubes to make sure that's happening. Yeah, I definitely don't like the audio on these, but it's literally the only way I can get um, the content into the machine. And what I mean by I don't like the audio, I do not like the audio of the microphones of the microphone for the AirPods. By comparison, I mean it's clear and it's fine for having a conversation. It's not great for on air. Um, so I notice like when I see somebody wearing a pair of AirPods on like CNN, it always bugs me. It's like can't they give them a microphone like a boom mic or something? Um, anyway, so this is here, but it's just really for decoration for a little while. Um, Doing this a little later in the day because I'm setting up a new machine. It's just a backup because I've got to put this is the machine that I'm normally on, and it is not available to me. Got my little vaccine sticker there, but this one's not available to me for at least a couple of weeks while it gets its battery issue resolved. They should really just like you go to the store if you've got like you got a $3,000 computer and you popped for the Apple Care. They should just have something in the back that goes, here you go. And they take the old one when and it's almost like it's almost like a battery swap, kind of like a Neo car over in China. But they don't have that. So we have to go through all of this rigmarole. But the good news is we got the audio setup, we've got the live streaming setup, we've got the Figma reinstalled, we've got a lot of things reinstalled. It's just like dawning on me, yeah, but you haven't set up your coding environment. It's like, yeah, I haven't, have I? So I've got to do all of that as well. Luckily, I've got everything backed up. Like the old machine is backed up, so it's not a big deal. Anyway, that's not what you're here for, but I'm running the test, and what we're really here for is to go through the feedback loop. So let's go ahead and do that. Greetings, one and all. Chris Courtney here, New Pragmatics. Time for the feedback loop. So good to have you along. We've got a couple of students in here today. It's Abby and Abraham, and both of which are working on some form of their portfolio. So a rare twofer on the portfolio front. We're going to take a look and see where things are. I know that Abraham's working through his, Abby's working through hers. I think Abraham's really working on more of the resume side of things at this point. But Abby's trying to pull her first portfolio together, and she's learning Webflow along the way, which it's Webflow, and Webflow can be Webflow. So we're going to take a look at that. But without further ado, let's see if this transition works. Oh my goodness, it's lickety split. It worked. Um, I like it when I do a fresh install of OBS because suddenly the hotkeys work again. This won't work probably tomorrow. So without further ado, let's get started. Um, well, there I am, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for looking for Webflow. And here we are looking at Abby's portfolio, and she's done something pretty interesting. She's gone through and like found stuff like 2015. It's pretty pivotal because this is back when Abby was still in high school. And this is like she was working on the yearbook, and she's been a visual designer for a while. I mean, that would have at this point been 6 years ago. So, and I'm guessing that was her senior year of high school. So not like she wasn't starting high school then. But the point here is on the About Me page, she's trying to show that like I'm not new to design. I've been doing this a while, and like she shows some other pages, some other things that she had worked on along the way. And I think this is interesting when you have some illustration skills, when you've done design for a while. showing a few things along the way. What you don't want to do is you don't want to give a sense of this is where we are now. So this is where I might come back and like have a label here or something that says like um, high school, college, you know, professional, or college, post college, like so that people understand that these are not all one trapped moment in time. And that does raise a question of, okay, how much are we planning on writing over here? I don't think that you really have to like write a book over here to the left, but I do think that's going to need to be reasonably substantial, for this kind of organization to make sense. Um, and you'd raised some question like how many things to add over here. I think this is fine. I think this is fine. I think if you had a couple things that were from the professional side of things that you wanted to add, I think that would be fine as well. But the real goal of this is to have people focusing on, your homepage. So I think that, this, you this image here, I know that's you. I think we need to do something more with the image to make that work. Because right now it's simply that's simply not doing it. So we need more there. We need to get your content in here. And what we end up doing with the design of these files, you might end up doing something like creating a column that, a two column design that kind of has more padding to the outside. So it's like text and then images or some other combination. I am interested to see what you come up with. Um, but but these images, are they fine? Yeah, they're fine, but we need to do something to make sure people don't go, this is the portfolio, because this is not. This is like the journey to now, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind as you're working through. I know that you were working on your homepage, and I was looking at this, and I just want to kind of spend a minute because I know this is in progress, but I think you may be making this too hard on yourself by using CSS Grid. And the reason I point that out is that, I was going in here, I was looking at, okay, I said, okay, well, she's made the CSS Grid, and is Abby falling into the same trap that she fell into down here, where this was at one point CSS Grid, but it wasn't responsive, because the moment it became responsive, like everything cracked. And here, this is also going to suffer from responsive issues. As you can see, like it's struggling to figure out what it wants to be right now. Like stuff's just all over the place. So if we come back over here to this desktop, what I might suggest doing, and this won't save, in case you're wondering if you're following along, Webflow has a preview function where you can come through and you can kind of mess with things. I would really encourage you to think about this in terms of display, and then if we want to look at it in terms of, this is flex. So you could organize it, like right now this is like you, and I kind of like the shape thing. It's like a star and kind of outline. It's got a little style to it. I like it. I can get down with it. It's got a background on it which you may not want, because like it doesn't lend itself to kind of blend in here. But the bigger thing that I'm looking at here, and I'm just going to throw it back in like this, is how are we organizing? This would be the classic, how am I organizing the HTML conversation? Obviously, in Webflow, I almost cut it in Flexbox, but in Webflow, you're not organizing so much the HTML as you are organizing the content that the elements reside in. Now you have this div block, and I'm kind of wondering what's going on with the div block. Um, because if I was coming in and really doing this, what I suspect would happen. Obviously, I've switched this to display, and I'm just going to remove this class because you don't need it. We're going to go back to display, and it keeps calling this grid 8. I think that must be just, because I'm in a preview version. I'm going to move this div block up. I'm going to put this heading inside of that div block. Then I'm going to put this text block inside of that div block. I'll put all these blocks in that div block. Okay. Now I'm going to move that heading up. And now I'm going to come back over here and say, all right, Flexbox. Let's take a look at this. Okay, so right now, this first div has, the image has a height and a width of 100%. It's trying to basically boss this thing around. What I want to do is I want to come in here to this div and say, okay, div block, you know what? Let's actually throw this into, well, that is in Flex. Okay, well, that's interesting. Let's go ahead and do this just as a static display. Oh, the width on this is 80 pixels. Well, okay. Why don't we change that to 60%? Okay. So now the div is 60%. Now I'm going to change the width on the image to 40%. Okay. And you're like, hey, what's going on? This is also where I'm going to position this static, and I'm going to float it left. And this is the old way that we used to lay stuff out, to be completely honest with you. There's nothing new about what I just did. I just created a div. I said, okay, well, this is 65%. And I could have done this a little differently. I could have done this a bunch of different ways, to be honest with you. But this div, this is at 60%. This is at 40%. So this is like adding up to 100%. Okay. I think you get the basic math that's going on. But if I want it, sometimes what I really want is I want this to have. It's kind of interesting. There's like a line there. I'm not really sure what's. Oh, see, medium violet red, violet red. That's got to be there intentionally. Oh, actually, that's the color. But let's come back through, and let's talk about. Okay, so I've got this div block here. If I made this. First of all, I want to get rid of the height. I don't need the height. Oh, that's interesting. Maybe I did need the height because it's like everything's pink now. Um, yeah, I'm not sure what the structural reasoning behind that is, but I'm just going to change it to 55%. So this is all everything's automatically built to float left. I have floated your image right. That creates a two-column design. If I then came through on the div block and said, hey, I want there to be padding of 100 pixels to the top. Well, that's not working. Oh, well, let's take a look at this further. Let's take a look at this heading. Let's say on the heading, I said 200 pixels to the top. Wow, okay. Something's happening here that is unexpected. Let's see here. That's not how it would typically work in HTML, so I'm trying to sort out why it's acting like that. Height of this div block should be, let's change this to a min height of 300 pixels. Okay. Let's go ahead and float that. Okay, so it was a float thing. All right, fair enough. Again, I'm not completely sure why this color is coming in. I'm going to remove it. So I'm just going to say none. And now we have this. Now on this div block, now that we've got that float thing sorted out, I'd probably come through and say, all right, so I want you to reside more down the page. And it's going to be like that. All right, so now we've kind of got it lined up with you. If you come through and you end up like removing this background, and I'm just going to move this a little further down so we can kind of see how it would reside. This with the background removed, with that content over to the side, that works pretty well. Nothing wrong with that. And then when it comes to mobile, you could shift your image to the top and have this content right below. And in that regard, you might want to use CSS Grid. But I don't think that you want to. You don't need CSS Grid here. there's just no need for it at this display size. When you get over here, like, let's actually flip this idea around a bit. And let's say, okay, well, no, actually, no, let's not do that, because we've talked about this in terms of why. Well, actually, you would need to like adjust the font size and all of that as well. Um, but that's interesting because Flex, or not Flexbox, Webflow doesn't want to allow you to have a one column CSS grid, which removes the ability to just reorder the columns. So that's very interesting. Although we could totally work around that. So my point is, when we started this, I'll what I'll do is I'll load this in a different div so that you can see it, so we can kind of bounce between the two, because it's not going to load the other design. Okay, so that's where you're at. No, I'm not crazy about Webflow, sorry. That's where you're at. You've got this grid. The problem with the grid is, as this comes down, this is just going to get really convoluted. Um, this is just all crashing together. It's just not working. But if you were to simply just make it a div, all right, and then say, okay, this side is a certain width and that side's a certain width, it lines up perfectly. So grid is great when you're really using it, but when you're using it for like individual items, like what we were seeing here, or actually what we were seeing here, if we turn the grid on and look at this, like, this is back to that individual item thing that just wrecks itself. So keep that in mind as you're working through this, that you don't have to use grid for everything. And sometimes it's just simpler to use just straight up um, a simple div block combination and then just float things. All right, that said, you had another question here. Um, homepage photo. Yeah, okay, so we've talked about that. Good spacing between sections. Let's take a look at this detailed view that you've got. Okay, so here's Fresh Market, and again, I think that this is coming along. So this is kind of interesting. How there's something going on here, and I'm not sure what it is yet. Surveys and input, and yeah, I'm not sure what's happening with this design. Let's refresh this to see if it might be related to the changes that I made on the front. It may be, I don't know. Yeah, it was. Okay. So apparently you're using, if I had to guess, this is like CSS grid throughout. Is that right? Let's see. So let's twist open research. Heading, div block. There it is, CSS grid. Okay. So you're going grid heavy on everything, and this may be a situation where um, it's probably a situation where I overwrote something on that front page, and then it applied. It seems to be working fine for you here. Um, as far as the spacing between elements goes, I think this is pretty good. I don't see like, oh, these things are really too close together. It is interesting because this is like a research section, and then you have a slightly different spacing between items that are within a section, and then you have this larger spacing between the sections. So that was research. This is analyze, and personas is slightly closer in user stories and user flows, um, and story maps. See, I can tell like you haven't really refined this area, because this feels like it's a new area, not a different method within the same area. You get down here to create, and create's kind of different because you're leading with an image where you hadn't led with an image before. But I think the spacing is still great enough to work for you. And I'm just going to put this in preview mode so that it actually scrolls. You see how much nicer it scrolls when it's not in that other mode. Although you can see like some spacing issues that have popped up. Um, User flows. This is obviously still needing to be designed. Um, it's funny, you've got like a 4 here, which, I'm going to guess you're going to have to come in with some sort of visual here. But as far as the spacing between sections go, I think that I think that this spacing between like larger areas is fine. The spacing between the methods inside of an area are fine. The thing I would like for you to think about is, do I need to be going full width um, on these? Because here it's okay. Here it's like, I do think you need more space between your visual elements and your type. Here it's way wider than it needs to be. This is okay, but I mean, obviously, your user flows looks, really short. But I think this is something that you will be able to add some color to. Um, so overall, it needs some tweaking. I think it's too wide right now. I think your vertical height is fine, but I think you need to bring it that width in. So a few things there. We talked about the about page, we've talked about the home page, we talked about the case study. There are some definite tweaks to be made. Roll this tape back and revisit it as you work on these things, because I think that some of it is going to be something that you need a second viewing, because we've covered a lot here. Let's go ahead and go over to Figma, because I had to reinstall that too. This is Abraham, and Abraham, you've got some questions here, which you were nice enough to note. It says third project. It's technically not accessible on my portfolio yet. It just says in project. Slotted up to go over 7 days. Problem? Um, no, not really. Is there a better way to describe projects than being web-based software? It's built in React, being staged behind a password, caregiver facing, not patient facing. Um, well, I think this is enterprise software. I mean, if it's something that an organization is using, but not the consumer. You have consumer software. Yeah, you have consumer interfaces, and then you have enterprise interfaces. And this is enterprise work. You're doing work for businesses. So I don't think web. I think I would just say it was an enterprise. You worked on an enterprise web platform. That would be the way that I would describe it. Do I need to list my cell number? No, I don't think so. For the sake of room, may I link all 3 projects? That's really interesting on the cell phone number thing, because I come back to that, and I know recruiters want to hop on the phone, so I would rather them not have to hunt for that. It's just one additional communication that you have to have with somebody. Hey, can I have your phone number? And then you send them the phone number, and then you have to meet up. But I also like to be aware, because I won't answer a phone call from a number I don't recognize. And I've actually missed clients that way before, because it's just like, I'm just not trained. I I don't know what this is for, but it's not making phone calls. That's what Zoom is for, um, which is weird, right? Does a resume need to have the same font and coloring as my portfolio? Uh, I I would like it to. I'd like it to be consistent. But big thing. Here's the big thing, and I've talked about this before. I've written about it. You got to have this ready for an applicant tracking system. And applicant tracking systems mean that this needs to be like a uh, single column design, like in something like Microsoft Word or Google Docs, like something that I can export, put into an applicant tracking system, and it's machine readable. All right. The things that make this not machine readable are, first, this big gray block, this icon over here, the yellow underlining on the words, the way that this is stacking across with the line, it's going to read that as like an I, or it's not going to read it at all. Um, so what I need this for the human interaction. Like you're submitting, I would like you to submit two resumes to a job. One that looks like this, and it is for the humans, and then one that is for the robots. Because if they have like, and I would always attach this one second, like where it says submit your resume, I would submit the Google Doc version of this that is simplified, that this set has just has your name, and it's very straightforward. And then I would submit like almost every place you apply, it has an additional documents. I would submit the human focused this to them, and I think that um, anybody who's hiring will recognize that you are aware of what things are really like out there for in the hiring market. You're so many designers, they make these absurdly complicated resumes that don't go through an applicant tracking system. They just error out. And I got to be honest with you, I don't know how many of them actually get through that round of the review cycle. The times when they get through is when there are not enough applicants for the position, and they just go, let's go look at all the ones that errored out. If there are enough applicants for the position, nobody revisits the ones that errored out. So that's the main concern I have here. You need a simplified version of this for submission into applicant tracking systems. And if you have that, you're golden. Okay. All right. And just basically the same. I don't see any difference here. So like get a third version of this that is just plain black and white, one column, and it's really just for the machines. Okay. All right. Hey, I remember what the hotkeys were. That's nice. All right. Thanks everybody for joining today. Is testing out the machine, making sure the machine was running. It's something that we have to do before we go live, because I'm gonna have to roll with this thing for a couple of weeks. But the good news is it appears to be working, and the audio is working, and the video is capturing, and I like that. I like all that. I like working machines. All right, folks. Thanks, Abraham. Thanks, Abby, for submitting your work today. And for the rest of you, actually, I've got a busy afternoon of calls, so I'm going to see a lot of you this afternoon. But otherwise, have a great weekend. I'll see you next week. Peace.